All right, so this is on the back side of your notes, and this is part 2. We'll finish with this, and then you'll have an assignment, which will give you practice on what we've been talking about. So for number 6, we're going to look at our line, which is a -2, which that represents our b. And so we're going to begin at 0, -2. And remember that we always begin on the y-axis, which is the line in the middle. That goes straight up and down. So I'm going to place my first point at 0, -2. After we do that, we want to look at our slope, which is a +1/3. Again, remember to draw your arrows so that you know exactly what direction to move in. So I'm going to go up 1 and right 3 because my slope is positive. So up 1, right 3. Keep going. Up 1, right 3. And remember that we want to fit as many points as possible on the graph. So we have a whole quadrant down here where we can fit extra points to keep our line going. So starting where I began, I'll go down 1, left 3, down 1, left 3. Remember that the only time we go left is if we are continuing our line in the opposite direction from which we started. Or we would go left if we go off the graph. Then we just do the opposite of what the normal slope would be. So draw your arrows and draw a perfect, or as perfect as you can, straight line through that. And we've got our line. That's exactly how it should look. All right, let's try a couple more. For number 7, we've got y = -3, x - 5. And automatically, even if we aren't always sure about what our slope is quite yet, we want to begin with looking at the number that has no x next to it. That's going to be where we begin. So my b is 0. 0 always comes first, -5. That's the point where I begin. So on my graph, I start at 0 and go down 5, and that's my starting point. Now remember what we talked about with slope. When your slope is negative, which slope is the number in front of x, we always go down first. But a common mistake is to forget to put your slope over the number 1. So we need to do that. So -3/1. And we're going to go down 3 and right 1 from where we began. But this is a problem because if we start at where we began and we try to go down 3 and right 1, we're going to be off our graph. So that's not going to be very useful for us in drawing our line. So when that happens, when you go off the graph, we need to keep our line going in that same direction, but just going the opposite way. So instead of going down, we go up. Instead of going right, we go left. Again, we only go left when we go off the graph, when we make that second point after we began. So I'm going to go up 3, left 1, keep going, up 3, left 1, up 3, left 1, and then that's as many points as we can get. I'll draw my arrows to represent that my line goes in infinite directions, or infinite ways in each direction, and that would be my correct line from that. Let's do one more where we're just practicing graphing. And so for number 8, we've got y = 6/1, because remember, when my slope is a whole number, I want to make that a fraction so I know how far to go up or down and then right. And my last number represents b, which is -3, same as -3. So my b is 0, -3, and I'm going to put my first point at 0, -3, which is right here. Now my slope is +6/1, which means that starting from where I began, I'm going to count up 6 and to the right 1. So let's go ahead and do that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then to the right 1, so that puts my second point there. Draw my line through the points and make sure I've got arrows on each side. Okay, last 2 are word problems, and there will be probably 2 questions on your quiz or so that require you to write an equation from a word problem. So let's talk this out. I think it will make a lot of sense after we talk it out. It says to join the fantasy football team, there is an initial fee of $20. So let's circle that and remind ourselves that that's where we begin. We begin with having to pay that starting out fee. Then a rate of $10 per month is charged. Now remember that the word per typically represents slope. So I'm going to circle $10 and just write an M for that so that I am clued on to the fact that the $10 is my slope. It says write an equation to find the total amount a person is charged for any number of months. So in this case, there are two unknowns. We don't know the total amount, and we also don't know how many months they're a part of this team, which will affect that total amount. So the first thing I'm going to say is I'm going to tell what Y and X represent so that I'm really clear with where I'm going in this problem. So Y is always going to be the total cost or the total amount of something. Okay, this is called defining your variable. Now my second unknown is X, which is the number of months. So, okay, and my X represents the months. So what our equation would be is Y, or the total cost, which is what we're trying to figure out, the total amount. So that's going to be $10 times however many months that they are a part of that fantasy football team. And that makes sense because if X is 1, that's going to be $10 times 1 month, which is $10 or $10 for 1 month. When X is 2, or we've been apart for 2 months, that would be 2 for X. So 10 times 2 is $20 for 2 months. Then lastly, so we have $10 per month, but we also have to add to that the initial fee. That is where we begin starting out. And what they start out paying is $20. So our equation is $10 per month, or $10 times however many months you're apart, which is X, and then plus that initial fee. Now part B says use the equation to figure out how much you'll be charged after 10 months. And remember that X represents the months. So to figure this out, we'll use our equation. So the total cost, which is Y, equals $10 times 10 months plus 20. 10 times 10 is 100, and 100 plus 20 is $120. So that would be our answer. Okay, last problem is about a person taking a road trip. And it says on day 1 of a road trip to California, the Ray family had already driven 1,000 miles. So that's where they have began. Okay, so they've already done that. The next day, they drive a speed of 60 miles per hour. And remember that per is our word for slope. And so 60 is going to represent our slope. It says write an equation to find the total miles the Ray family had driven. So the thing that we're trying to figure out, the total, is going to be what Y represents. So Y is the total miles. And X is going to be the part of the problem that leads to how many miles you have driven. So X is going to be the hours. The more time you're driving, the further you go. So what our equation would be is Y equals 60 miles per hour times however many hours that you're driving for plus 1,000. And that 1,000 represents how many miles they had began with before they started day 2. Now for the last part, it says how many miles has the Ray family traveled after 5 hours of driving on day 2. So remember that X represents hours, so we're going to just plug in 5 for our X. So that would be Y equals 60 times 5 plus 1,000. And when we figure out that total, that would be 1,030 miles.